on to Episode Spotlight, where I take a look at a single episode. Now, I am not the type of person who would tell anyone to skip a certain episode. Sure, not every episode from any TV show is perfect, but I believe that everyone should judge the episode for themselves. However, there is one episode that I am torn between saying to skip it or watch it last. I'm not saying that it's awful or anything. It's just that comparing it with the rest of the show, it feels a little bit out of place to be the first episode and should have been shown last or removed altogether. So which episode am I talking about? None other than the first episode of Berserk. Not the 2016 version. I'll talk about that later. Today I'm looking at the 1997 version. So let's dive right in. The episode begins with a blacksmith forging a large sword while the swordsman is sitting in the dark. We then get our opening Tell Me Why. Some people might find this song terrible, which I don't blame them. I have to admit something about it seems a little bit off, but at the same time I can't help but sing along with it. However, I can't put my finger on why that is. My best guess is that the song is in English, and after listening to it a couple of times it just grew on me and gets me pumped for the episode. After the opening, we see the swordsman enter a town and is passed by a wagon full of people. In the local tavern, a man is talking to the bartender. The discussion is shortly interrupted when a group of thugs enters with a young girl, who they begin to torment while the other patrons look away. The swordsman enters and shoots 3 of the 4 thugs with arrows. The last thug tries to use the girl as a human shield and threatens the swordsman to pay for what he's done. The swordsman ignores the thug's threats by demanding to see his boss. When he doesn't comply, the thug gets hit in the shoulder with a throwing knife. The swordsman then tells the thug to give his boss a message instead. One of the thugs that got shot earlier tries to attack the swordsman from behind, but... Elsewhere, a man tells a minister about what had happened at the tavern. The minister orders a search for the swordsman. He then laments to himself that he must be the one to bring the news to the Baron, who seems to be watching the search from a window. Meanwhile, the swordsman tries to sleep in a nearby forest when the brain on his neck begins to bleed and an evil laugh echoes. Then flashing images of 5 beings appear before him. He tries to attack one of them with his sword, but it turns out to be an illusion. Back in the town, the minister meets with the Baron and begs for forgiveness, claiming that the swordsman is just a lone wanderer. He then tries to satisfy the Baron by offering more food and money, but the Baron turns it down. It turns out the Baron wants to meet the swordsman as well as wanting to hear people scream and the sounds of bones cracking. The minister begs the minister not to hurt his people since they had a deal. The Baron replies that he doesn't care before going on a killing spree while burning the town down to the ground. During the raid, the swordsman shows up and the Baron orders his men to attack him. However, they're no match for him and are killed. The swordsman then attacks the Baron, who seems to be losing at first before changing into his demon form. When it seems like the Baron is winning, the swordsman uses a hidden can that he had in his prosthetic arm. When the Baron asks for mercy, the swordsman tells him that he's given him the same amount of mercy that the Baron gave to the townspeople. The swordsman then leaves the Baron to burn with the town as he grabs the odd thing that was around the Baron's neck throughout the episode. The episode ends with a sudden flashback of a younger version of the swordsman who is about to fight someone who is twice his size. Before I get my thoughts on why this episode has me thinking of telling people to skip it or watch it last, I want to give my thoughts on the episode itself. First off, the animation. It's obviously on a budget, and some scenes are nothing but watercolor still frames. Some people might call it bad, but I'm okay with it. It may be because I saw some shows with worse animation, or maybe because I read the manga after seeing the series that I understand that it would have been hard for the animation to be just as great as the artwork in the manga at the time. Speaking of animation, this is one of the very rare times I have to mention the animation studio, which is Oriental Light and Magic, or OLM for short. While the studio has done a good number of shows and movies, they're most well known for animating Pokemon. Yeah, you heard me. The same studio that did this show, which is the most violent show they had done at this moment, also did Pokemon, one of the most popular kids shows. And to top it all off, both shows were aired the same year in Japan, but only months apart. As for the plot, it's simple but at the same time can be forgettable. There are times where I forgot about this episode whenever I thought about this series until I rewatch it. Now, I don't have a problem with an episode with a simple plot if it's written well. However, this episode isn't one of them. It's like it's missing something. It's like it wants to draw people in with a good plot, but someone comes by and holds them back. Like any media that's adapted from something else, Berserk has some changes from its source material, even though a good portion of the series does stay close to the second arc of the manga. This episode alone has the most change. While it does follow the first chapter of the manga beat for beat, about somewhere between a third to half of the things that happen in that chapter were either altered or removed when adapting from this episode. Now, I'm not going to cover every single little change since it will make this video way too long, so I'm only going to cover 2 changes. If you really want to know how different this episode is to its chapter counterpart, I did a review on that chapter. The link to that review will be in the description below. The first change that I want to cover is who the swordsman saves in the tavern. In the anime, it was a girl, while in the manga, it was a fairy. One could believe this is just a tiny change that has no impact on the story. Well, yes and no. In the show, we don't see the girl again after this episode since the rest of the series is just a flashback. In the manga, however, the fairy becomes a main character as well as one of the swordsman's companions, and is the first person to ask the swordsman for his name. Yeah, for those who are wondering why I don't call the swordsman by his name throughout this video, it is because no one has asked and the swordsman didn't have a reason to tell anybody. Oh, and a little side note, the girl does appear in the manga, but let's just say things don't end well for her. The second change that I want to cover is the minister. For the most part, he was the same in both versions. However, in the manga, he wasn't a minister but a Lord Mayor, while in the anime, he was a minister who used to be a mayor. To me, it made more sense why he made a deal with the Baron in the first place, because why would the Baron make a deal with a minister instead of the mayor? Another thing is that in the manga, he does meet the swordsman and talks to him before seeing the Baron, while in the anime, the two never interact with each other. Now for the reasons of why this episode has me thinking of telling people to skip it or watch it last. The first reason is that it comes off as an epilogue. It may be as a result of reading the manga as well as seeing the whole series, but it feels like something had happened before we get in the aftermath first. I'm sure that there are some shows that do this, but it feels a little bit out of place to me here. It may be because of the changes that were made, or maybe because we don't see this version of the swordsman again until the very last scene of the very last episode. The second reason that is that it fails to make me question what could have happened to the swordsman that led him to where he is in this episode. A small part of it is because of the changes that were made from the manga to the anime, but it's mostly because the manga had handled it better. Before we learn about the swordsman's past, we follow this guy for about 7 chapters. Throughout those chapters, there were tiny moments where I couldn't help but wonder what could have made him act like this or make him think this way. One example is that there was a couple of times when he lashes out at someone whenever they touch him. At first, I thought he was just being a jerk until it happened a second time. Another example is the talk between him and a priest. Yeah, a priest. During their talk, it looked like the swordsman was thinking of a past decision that he might have regretted, or thinking of someone who regretted a past decision. The third reason is that if this episode was seen last, it might give some people a little bit more of a reason to check out the manga than the ending that we got. Now I'll try to explain what I mean without giving the ending away for those who haven't seen it. All I will say that something big happens that caused the swordsman to lose his eye and arm. If this episode was shown right after that, it could make some viewers wonder even more on what transpired off screen between the two episodes and might want to check out the manga to see what happened. The last reason is that you're not going to miss anything if you skip this episode. Sure, it would have been better if it was seen last, but it didn't really impact the story overall, except to show the difference between the swordsman in this episode and his younger self. Sure, it foreshadowed the swordsman losing his eye and arm. However, it would have been more impactful when we saw that happen if we didn't know ahead of time. Despite my reasons on skipping or watching this episode last, I don't completely hate it. I have fun spotting the differences between the manga and this episode. Plus, the voice acting isn't that bad, despite some weird line delivery in the dub. Plus, this is a good, tiny sample of how dark this series can get. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Have you seen this episode? If so, what you thought of it? Was it worth a watch, a skip, or watched last? Let me know in the comments below.